can we pivot a little bit?
Sure. Let's do it.
All right, let's get to the good stuff here.
Okay.
Uh, it's just so much about the recruiting piece. I was like, well, we got to have that. This might be split into two parts. We'll see how long I have you for here. Uh,
Okay.
so you recorded with Benjamin Mena a couple
Yeah.
months ago. So first time getting your story out there, kind of your personal story out there about homelessness, 10 years on the streets, right? With your family, your childhood. Let's get into that. But like, I want to just kind of get your take first. Like, what's the reaction been like to that just initial release?
First of all, thank you for asking.
Yeah.
The reaction to the podcast that I did with Benjamin Mena has been overwhelming. I really didn't expect it, to be honest with you. I just went onto his podcast to talk about, Benjamin, just a little bit of a backstory, Benjamin, I was part of his book of the month club, and there was one of the books that we were reading, it's like a roundtable Zoom call, where everybody that read the book kind of jumps in there and gives their perspective. And there was one chapter that we were going over, and the chapter was about overcoming obstacles, right? And at this point, like, I've just heard about Benjamin Mena. Like, he's all over my LinkedIn, right? The guy's phenomenal. He's literally everywhere.
I love Ben so much.
Yeah. And so it's just by accident. Like, I really wasn't thinking about it, right? I was just sharing my experience with overcoming an obstacle. And that obstacle was, like, I lived on the streets homeless for a decade, addicted to drugs and alcohol. And there was pauses, like I could see everybody's face on the Zoom.
Yeah.
And so, Benjamin, we got in contact with each other after that initial interaction. And he was like, listen, I'd love if you would come onto my podcast. And so that's how it started. Went talked on the podcast. And then what has happened since then is, like, it's just, so many people have reached out to me through LinkedIn. I can't even tell you. I was just talking to my sister yesterday morning about this. I've had so many people reach out to me and just want to talk to me, just to learn more. Because a lot of people have husband, wife, brother, sister that's in active addiction right now. Did I have any advice on, what to do? Do you still apply the love from a distance aspect? Because, when you're in active addiction, you're breaking people's hearts.
Yeah.
That really, really love and care about you, right? And there's a lot of people out there that are in that position right now that have a loved one that's out there lost in active addiction. There's nothing they could do. So there's been a lot of conversation about that. Some people are just curious. I've had a few conversations with multiple people, and I would probably venture to say that they'll turn into friendships, right? People are just, I use the word loosely, fascinated, because I think when you typically hear about somebody that has, well, let me just rephrase that. When somebody actually lives on the streets the way that I did for as long as I did, it usually doesn't end well.
Yep.
Right. The world, living on the streets, an inactive addiction is just something that most people will never know or understand. And you usually don't come out of it at all.
Yeah.
Or if you do come out of it, right, you're reduced to some form of, you're just not going to put your life back together. Because I think what makes it even just a little bit more different for me is, like, I didn't do this at a young age. Like, I disappeared at 30 years old when I walked away from my family. It wasn't like I was 18, and disappeared until I was 28 and then had an entire lifetime to put it all back together. I was a grown man.
30. You had a wife and it was 10-year-old. Your daughter was 10 at the time?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that was, and then that was just like you packed up for a weekend and it turned into kind of a 10 years thing, right? Is that correct? You
Close.
kind of
So what
close
happened is
in.
so what happened is I was already wrapped up in the drugs and alcohol,
Yeah.
right? I couldn't shake it. Back then, there, at least I didn't know. I grew up in a small town. Um, I didn't know that there was help. Not that I would have taken it and got better,
Yeah.
right? I was that entrenched in it. But you just didn't ever hear of the things that are out there today. Like you have NA and AA and CA, and there's hotlines and community health centers and
Yeah.
detoxes, and there's places to there's hotlines. There's a hotline for everything. Um, if that stuff was available back then, I surely didn't know about it. But what happened to me is I was so wrapped up in the drugs and alcohol. I wasn't working anymore. And my family just couldn't deal with me. They didn't want anything to do with me. I hadn't seen my daughter in probably a couple months. You know, um, I was just the only thing that made any kind of sense to me because it was so bad. I didn't know where to turn. Um, is I just thought to myself, I have to leave. I've got to get out of here because in this hometown, I couldn't find um, a source of light, right, to give me any hope. There was just nothing there. So what I thought would happen, I think,
Yeah.
right, is that I would just go get help somewhere, right, and then try to stop this drugs and alcohol spin that I was on, and then maybe come home. I think that's what I was thinking, right? But that's not what happened. It was much much worse. I ended up leaving. It was November of 1999. I just threw all my stuff in a car, and in the middle of the night, with just the last couple dollars that I had left to my name, and threw a bunch of boxes and pictures and things that I thought I would want to keep, if something bad happened, and I left, and I never went back. It wasn't in the cards. I ended up living out there for a decade.
And you were still in the Midwest. Did you go kind of
No, I was
elsewhere or
here. No, no, I
down
stayed
Florida?
in Florida. Stayed in
Yeah.
Florida the whole time. Yeah. I mean, the first year, I think it was about a year. The first year, God, I hate to say this, but it's the truth. It's like I want to say that it wasn't as bad because you got to remember at this point, my mind is so blurred. I am so set. Even then, even the first year, I was so separated from reality. That I just couldn't make sense of anything. But the reason that I say the first year wasn't as bad is because at least I had my car,
Yeah.
right? I had a little 4-door Honda. I love that thing, and but at least I had the car to sleep in, right? Because I didn't have any money for a hotel,
Yeah.
but I had the vehicle. At least I had a roof over my head, right? And so there was some semblance of protection, right? And then I ended up wrecking the car, right? And so now I'm actually like on the street with nowhere to go, nowhere to turn, nobody to call. Nobody wants to hear from me at this point, right? I've disappeared. Like nobody knows where I am. Shit. I didn't even know where I was, you know. And then, I remember after I'd wrecked the car and I realized that, like, oh my God, like, I don't even have a car now. I can't take my possessions. There's nobody to call. I don't have two pennies to rub together. And I'm on the street and I don't know what to do. Right. And I just remember in that moment thinking to myself, holy shit, like, how did I get here? But there's something else that happens. Well, at least it happened to me. Um, the first couple nights that I was actually without the car and just on the street with nowhere to go, that, man, there's something that happens to your brain. At least it did for me. When you realize that you are out there on the streets and there's nowhere to go, there's nowhere to turn, there's nobody to call, and you have no protection, I just went into this mode of purely survival, right? Because I can't walk inside a house and close the door. and sit on the couch. I can't get into the car anymore and at least close the door to the car, and I could put the windows up so there's some form of a protection. And I didn't have that anymore. Right. And so I went into survival mode because, the streets is a very, very dangerous place. When you're out there and you're using drugs and you're drinking and that's the only thing that you care about.
Yeah.
You willingly and unwillingly sometimes put yourself in some very, very dangerous situations. And I remember thinking like there would be periods of time that I would think to myself, like I would just have these moments of clarity, right? And I would think to myself, holy shit, man, I left my kid. Like I left my kid and how do I get back there? But so much shame and so much guilt and remorse and agony, that a human being would feel dealing with that emotion and I was in no condition to handle it. Like I was in no place mentally, physically, like I was not capable of handling that much. I couldn't. Right. And so I would just use again. Right. And that's how I would push the feelings away, which with just the continued drug use and alcohol and anything that would separate me from those feelings that I was having about my family and about my kid.
And how long were you in that mode where it was no car, still moments of clarity, but not like, hey, I got to give up this stuff?
9.5 years.
Wow.
You could what happened to me was at some point, you just give up the fight. Right. I mean, I remember, after year one, there's a vague recollection. It's like, oh my God, it's been a year, and then year two goes by and year three goes by. And at some point, I don't know if it was year between year 3 and 4 or 2 and 3 or whatever, but, I just gave up hope.
And then you just survival.
Yeah. I'm just in pure survival mode. I've got so much drugs and alcohol in me that I barely have any feelings at all. Dude, and being out there on the street, you run into people, you're passing people and like, I am so spiritually bankrupt, at this point that I'm not even sure that I care if I live or if I die. Because I can't see myself overcoming that, being 5 years gone, no job, no license, no house, haven't talked to your family or friends. Nobody knows where you at. Like, how do you even begin to rebuild something like that? Right. It's so overwhelming that you just throw in the towel, and you just say to yourself, I am absolutely going to die out here on the streets one day. I don't know how it's going to happen, but it is definitely going to happen. And I'm not sure that I care because I've created so much wreckage that there's no way I'm putting that back together.
What are your thoughts? Do you think people have to, when someone's in a situation like you were in with the addiction and you don't care and it's the damage, and you mentioned you just one day you just like, I just gave up fighting, almost like fighting like the negative. Is that kind of what you work with people and kind of say, look for, like, there's nothing you can really do. That person just has to give up on the destructive behavior.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's unfortunate, right? But that is what the disease of addiction is all about, right? It is so consuming to the individual that there is no real rationale one way or the other, because common sense, right? Common logic, from a family friend, would think, why can't he just get it together? He's a great guy. We loved him. He was valedictorian, of the high school class, and he had a beautiful girl or they had a beautiful boy, whatever the case is.
Yeah.
And there's nothing. It is pure. The disease of addiction is all about self-centeredness. right? And when you're in active addiction, right, you can't, you can't connect the dots of, man, I must be really hurting my family. My parents must be missing me, right? My sister must miss me terribly. I have to get back. Those thoughts may come into play a little bit, but not enough to where the addict or the alcoholic is going to say, I need to get back home
Yeah.
and I need to get help. Can you please help me? It is only about getting another one,
Yeah.
finding another drug, finding another drink. Where am I going to sleep tonight? What dumpster am I going to dive in so I can find food because I haven't eaten for 5 days? Right. Yeah, dude, I remember the first time I ate out of a dumpster. I was in West Palm Beach. I'll never forget it. I hadn't eaten in days. And I was starving to death. It was like 3 o'clock in the morning, and across the way I heard this door of a dumpster bang. And so I remember looking over way across the courtyard, and in the back of a building, I saw some dude coming out of the dumpster. And what I'd been doing previous to this, I was just stealing food.
Yeah.
Go into a grocery store, steal food, go to a soup kitchen, get some food. But this particular 4-day stretch, there was just nothing. I didn't have it in me. And I saw this guy coming out of a dumpster, and I thought, oh my God, is there food in there? And so I walked over there, and I opened up the back door, and I looked inside, and he was behind a restaurant, right? And so I remember looked in there, and there's a whole bunch of styrofoam trays, food laying all over the place. And
That was it.
when you haven't eaten for 5 days, like, it's all good.
Like you didn't, and that become kind of like a new normal
Yeah.
type thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is-
Yeah.
wow.
Just what you do, right?
Yeah.
Because that's what I mean when I say, when you're on the streets, you go into survival mode, right? You will literally do anything that you can to make sure that you get money from somewhere so you can get another drink or a drug, right? And you're going to do whatever you can at some point because you have to eat, right? You're going to do whatever it takes to get food into your body because your body can only last so long without food.
Wow. And if we go back, and I remember you talking about kind of when it first hit, like kind of that first time with alcohol, and you realize like, but maybe for the listeners that didn't listen to the episode yet, kind of where some of that stuff started with childhood. If you kind of want to, I know you've tied all this stuff together, worked through it. Like where did this kind of start? Right? Like,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sure. Great question. I'd love to share it. So I had a pretty traumatic childhood. When I was 9 years old, right? I had my mom and a stepfather, and a sister. My sister is a year and 3 months younger than me, and the guy was a maniac, right? He was beating the shit out of me for no reason whatsoever, right? Nobody could really. I really didn't tell anybody about the abuse, right? And the reason my mom didn't know about it at the time is because she was working at Ford Motor Company, right? And so she was working the night shift, so she would leave every day right around 5, right? And it would be me and my sister and this guy, right? And for whatever reason, who knows? He just got his kicks off beating the shit out of me, right? And so I just remember thinking at the time, what the fuck is going on? Like, why is this happening to me? But I didn't tell anybody about it because I didn't think anybody knew. And the reason that I didn't tell anybody about it is because I knew he wasn't hitting my sister, right? And in my eyes, at such a young age, the only thing that I could make sense of is, okay, as long as he's not hitting my sister, right, I'm going to weather this storm, however long it takes, right? And then at some point, I still to this day don't know how, but my mother found out about it, right? And of course, just like any parent, right, as soon as she found out about it, the next thing I know, he's out of the house somewhere for the day. Like, we're packing suitcases and throwing shit in boxes, and Before you know it, we're in a car and we're gone, right? And she files for divorce. And then I don't know the exact time frame, but the next thing I know, like my sister and I are at school, waiting for my mom to come pick us up. She never shows. And so my sister were waiting and waiting and waiting. Before you know it, the buses are gone. A lot of the kids are gone. She's not showing up. And like the principal or some guy comes out. He gets me and my sister because we're standing on the curb, waiting
Yeah.
in the carpool line. She doesn't show. Takes us back inside, and like what seemed like 5 minutes, who knows, could have been an hour. Like here comes walking to the door my grandfather and my two uncles, my mom's brothers. So I'm thinking, like, the hell's this all about? And like my grandfather is just like, your mom's going to heaven, right? And so I'm like not able to process like what he's saying, but what ended up happening is like this dude, my stepdad, waited for my mother in a parking lot at an intersection a mile from the school. And when he saw her coming through, he pulled his car out in front of her in the middle of the intersection. He got out of his car. He walked over to her car and he shot her and killed her right there on the spot.
Wow. What was, I mean, I've talked about this before. I mentioned on the podcast, I told you I lost my parents at age 5 within 9 days of each other. And I don't think I've ever been as floored as when I heard that 1 year story. And you say that for the first time, because it's from what you did to protect your sister and even your mother. And I mean, it's so, I can't relate. I can relate. I can't relate at all. In a sense, because I didn't have a sibling when my parents died, but I kind of want to talk about like after that, right? I think you mentioned your grandparents took you in. Like,
Yeah.
what can you remember of like the next 6 months, the next year? Like, did you? I think your grandparents took you in. Did you have to switch towns, schools? Like, what was that like? That after kind of the next year.
Yeah. So this happened in we were still living in Cleveland at the time.
Yeah.
Actually Strongsville, just outside of Cleveland. My grandfather, 6 months prior to this incident, had just retired from Ford Motor Company. My grandmother had just retired from Sears Roebuck. They had already purchased the house here in Florida, right? So they were getting ready to retire and move to Florida and live the golden years,
Yeah.
right? Play golf, play pinochle on Saturday nights with their friends, stress free, and for them also, like they had I still was something that's never really been brought up because I've never really thought about it until this moment, and so I appreciate you asking it. Um, the decision that they were faced with. What are we going to do with these two kids? We're supposed to be moving in Florida in 6 months and retiring. Now, what do we do?
Yeah.
So they had to make a decision, right? Is adoption to another family, to a younger family, an option? I'm sure, that there was many options explored. Not that and I'm sure it wasn't for lack because if they didn't want to raise us, but my grandparents were retirement age,
Yeah.
right? It's very difficult to raise kids when you're at retirement age and the kids are 9 and 10. There's a cultural gap. I mean, a generational gap that's so big, you know. But for whatever reason, right, they decided that they were going to raise my sister and I, and so they brought us to Florida with them.
God bless grandparents. I know for me, man, that rapport with my grandmother, who was my mom's mom, and I mean that relationship was so healing for us because she had lost a daughter, right? Just like your grandparents, right, had lost a daughter. I mean, did you? I know things you kind of you grow up, you hit adult age, and things went a little sideways. But how in those first couple of years was there like a bond? Were you guys able to kind of help each other a little bit, kind of through some of that stuff the first couple of years? Like, did how did that go? Because I know that was huge for me with having biological family to kind of heal with a little bit. Uh, yeah,
Yeah, that I wish that I could say that just wasn't my story, man.
just didn't happen. Yeah,
No. Listen, and my grandparents, God bless them. They so we had a very stable lifestyle, right? Both grandparents, if you think about it in today's society, like both parents at home, like wake us up to get us for school in the morning. They're
yeah,
home when we come home. Dinner's on the table. Clothes are always clean. Bills are always paid. A nice, clean home environment. No chaos. No anything. But for me, right? I remember for the first couple years they tried to get me into counseling because I'm sure that they saw that I just wasn't adapting well to this new life that had been pushed on me.
yeah,
Right. So we tried counseling for the first couple of years. I remember going weekly, monthly. But there was just something about that incident with my mom that just shook me to the core. And I just wasn't able. When I say overcome it, what I mean is until recently, until I came off the streets, got into therapy, got into recovery. For the first time, was I able to feel comfortable in my own skin and not have that continuous anxious anxiety type feeling that I've become accustomed to living with.
yeah,
I tried, they tried. I just never felt comfortable, never felt like it was my home.
yeah,
Right. And it's just, and I think, so I think that is what ultimately pushed me, into, I think I shared with you, the first time I had alcohol, right? I just remember that. I think I was like 15 or 16. It was a beer I got out of my grandfather's refrigerator, you know, um, and I just remember that warm, fuzzy feeling that I got, when I slammed that beer. Um, that was the first time that I actually felt normal. I'm like, whoa, like, what is this warm feeling that's just overcoming me? Like, this is what I'm supposed to feel like
yeah.
because I don't feel anxious anymore. And so I chased that for a really long time, but they did everything, Clark. They tried counseling. I just, for my sister, like, my sister experienced most of the same things that I did, minus the physical abuse. But she witnessed some of it, that I found out later. So she had her own secret, but, just for me, and it, I've just learned it touches and two people can almost experience the same identical thing and have complete opposite reactions to it.
Yeah.
Right. And for me, it was just like I never felt comfortable. I never felt a part of. I never felt at home, even though I had all those things. This was a feeling that was created from that incident with my mom being killed.
Yeah.
Right. And so it just led to some really bad things, for me, which ultimately, pushed me out the door of my own home and pushed me onto the streets.
I, I mean, I think anyone listening to this, it's so understandable how those chain of events happen. But then, and that's why it's so powerful. Again, you've completely beaten the odds coming back, and I definitely want to talk about the responsibility. As a man, a father, and a husband, I definitely want to cover that. But one of the things I want to say out loud, and to you, because you may have felt this too, but my experience was, and I'm so appreciative of you sharing and just being an open book. By the way, um, so thank you for
Well,
that. Um, it's so interesting because lost my parent. I think I felt the same way with alcohol. I never went down that. I didn't go down the path as far as you went, right? But I can't deny that I didn't have that feeling. And I think part of what it is with alcohol, especially because I do remember the first couple times I drank and I got drunk, is I was, and I didn't realize this until I was an adult. I was
mm,
so sick and tired of people knowing something so personal about me before they got a chance to know me. And
Yeah.
I don't know if you resonate with that. Even going from Ohio to Florida, people hear, "How'd you end up here?" Right? They hear, and I don't maybe before internet days, but like something would have been maybe a newspaper story. But I don't know if you felt that way. Just for me, it was just like, when can I had to like create this persona to almost make other people feel okay about something that happened to me. Uh,
I do remember that, but it didn't. Man, I appreciate you bringing that up because I'm thinking about things that I haven't thought about in a really long time. Yeah, Newtown. I can't tell you, like you said, new town, new school. Hey, where are you from? Ohio. Wow, how'd you get here? My mom died. My grandparents, blah blah blah. Yeah, but at some point that does get old. So I want to ask you a question though. So when your parents, which one did you lose last?
I think we're back.
Yeah, we're back.
Okay,
Okay.
it was new school. Mom died, and then you were there. So yeah,
Okay, so I wanted, yeah, so new school, yeah, so I that story got old, of course, right? And I'm sure you can resonate with that. But I wanted to ask you, so it was your which parent did you lose last?
yeah. So I lost. I was in France at the time. So my mom grew up in north of Boston, and my dad was born and raised in Algeria, and they met in France. And when I was 5, in the middle of the night, my mom woke me up and told me that my dad died. Uh,
Right,
and she had been in and out of the hospital. She had turned into, had schizophrenia, which developed. I think what I learned recently when she was really in France, she had a whole bunch of childhood trauma. My grandfather was not. It doesn't seem like a very good person. Did a lot of not nice things,
right.
um, which I don't verify anything. It's hard, right? Especially back in that era. But um, he had his own issues, took his own life. When my aunts and uncles and my mom were all between ages of 9 to 16. So a lot of my
Yeah.
grandmother, my mom followed that pattern in terms of mental issues, health issues,
Mhm.
schizophrenia. And so she'd been in and out of the hospital for a couple of years up until my dad's
Right.
death. So I'm sure from the stress and working, he grew at the graveyard shift, was a smoker, all that stuff. Um, I'm still not sure if it was a heart attack, pneumonia, kind of exactly what happened, but he was 41. Um, so she woke me up in the middle of the night. I still remember her waking me up, and I can't remember what she said exactly, just because it was in French, and I don't speak French anymore. Interestingly enough, but I remember, like I remember the face, and now that's it. And then so she sent me to live with close family friends because she had a lot of issues trying to figure all this out. She was alone. It's 1993. No
Yeah.
internet, no, nothing like that. She's alone. Family's all in the U.S. Did have one family member in Europe, but it was just hard, right, to navigate logistics and everything else. And uh, so she took family friends, and then 9 days later, some my dad's side of the family, there was an uncle that maybe wasn't the best person. Uh, put up a big fight with the government and all that, and was like, hey, I don't think she's fit to take care of Clark. Like, we want to take him in. And they sided with her at the time. So they sent her a letter that they're going to take me from her. Um,
Right.
and so she took her life 9 days later after my dad died.
How old were you?
5.
Okay. So when you were, let's jump ahead 10 years from that point. So you're
Yeah.
15 now, right?
Yeah.
And listen, some of us are drinking earlier than 15. So right around 15, did you ever experience any type of, you know, feelings of not being able to cope with that at all? Or did your current living environment kind of ground you and allow you to move forward?
So it's really interesting, and I'm happy to. I will share because I think it can actually give a different, interesting dynamic to the conversation. Because I'm just interested in your perspective too on this. Is I was I was really lucky, and I'm still lucky. I tell people I'm probably the luckiest person on this face of the earth, and I have no right to be here, even talking to someone like you, like right now. There was a whole 3-month battle who was going to take me in. My mom's technically half brother. took me in. They brought me in. They couldn't legally adopt me. It's just France and U.S. There's a whole thing.
Sure.
They make the grandmother the guardian. So my grandmother, my mom's mom, was my guardian. She lived in Massachusetts. So did my uncle. So I moved to Massachusetts. I learned English in 4 months. I forget all my French. As you said, we could fast forward 10 years. My adopted dad was amazing, creating that environment. Didn't have the generational gap that you mentioned with your grandparents, which I think I would have
Right.
had if I lived with my grandmother full time. But my grandmother also, he became one of my best friends. We hung out all the time. And in a sense, we were almost each other's therapy. Like, I never got prescribed any medication, and I never went to official therapy, believe it or not, or any counselor or anything. My dad was like, the family's going to love him, and we're going to have a creative childhood. I got into sports and all that good stuff. But I think what happened, my family took it really hard with my mom and everything else. I think I tried to, what I've realized later is I tried to kind of alleviate all their pain as much as I could. I didn't want them to worry about me. But in that, I never took care of me in a sense, right?
Right.
Like, I never
Right.
processed that. I think at the level that I needed to. I think I could get through it a lot until high school. But freshman year of high school and college, I got straight Fs both years. Like, we're talking like
Wow.
one GPAs, and then I would turn around sophomore year and get the best grades of my life and be a straight A student sophomore year,
Right.
both years. It
Yeah.
happened both times. Like, I would hang on, and then I would, so I could always do it. But it was like, where the swings were so big.
Yeah.
I think alcohol was the first beer at 7th grade. I didn't really hit till junior year, but again, I played sports in high school, and I wanted to stay on the team. That's what kept me going. And I had
Absolutely.
neighbors that were friends and guy friends and people. It's also age 6, because I moved here the day before I turned 6. It's so different than 10. 4 years apart. It's worlds apart in terms of how
Yeah.
you are. So it's almost, at 6 years old, the friends I was making couldn't process what happened to me. Right.
Right.
So they got to almost know me on a different level. I imagine if I was 10, fourth or fifth grade, completely different. Because actually, remember, I went to a private school in fourth or fifth grade and I hated it. It was the worst 5 years. Absolutely hated it. And so to fast forward to your question, it was really in college. I just kind of let go. I had no structure, no one around me. I just played Guitar Hero. I had Grilled Cheese Maker. I just partied my way through, and I was just like, I don't know what anyone else is getting. Like, I'm just assuming everyone else is doing the same thing. I'm like, how's everyone getting work done? I feel like they're partying with me, and then I realized, like, well, no, they're actually doing stuff the rest of the day, and I'm not, right? But I was just in this world of just like whatever. I gained weight, I party, like, I just didn't care about myself, and I just wanted to let go of kind of that, just the responsibility. So like, I let it go really bad. I never I got to some really low points, but it was just like, I just didn't have to just deal with it, deal with the weight of being an orphan and people knowing and all that. And I appreciate that about college. Um,
Sure.
but I also went to college with a lot of people that I, again, went to high school with, so I stayed kind of in that circle. I didn't really expand it much. But yeah, I definitely felt it. And I think I was denied. I mean, I always like fought back, because some people in my family, well, we got to watch out, and runs to your family. And I'm like, whatever, whatever. Because I was
Right.
pretty happy. I was always been optimistic, but I
Yeah.
was always like, but it was just there. And I just didn't realize it till a lot later on. Honestly, until I was probably about 28, 29.
Yeah.
I didn't realize the toll that all had that stuff had actually taken, because I just wanted to be normal.
Yeah, I can appreciate that. And that's why I asked you, because I often wonder, and that's one of the things that I talk about, especially when I'm talking to families, that are dealing with a loved one, a child, or even the loved one with an adult, that's struggling and they're trying to make sense of it, and I appreciate you sharing that so openly with me,
Yeah, of course.
because just for none of it makes sense, right? There's no formula, right? There wasn't anything. You just didn't have the desire, although there was an opportunity with the feelings that you just described. Like, there was definitely a window where you could have just went down the road,
Oh, completely. Like, multiple times.
right?
Multiple
Yes,
times. It
you
makes
could have,
no sense that I didn't get myself into more trouble. Like,
right.
no sense. Yeah.
Right. But then you have somebody like me, which is probably just experiencing the exact same feelings, just at a different stage in life, right? A little bit earlier than you. Not much, but dealing with the same emotional stuff that comes with the things that happen, right? And, one person just doesn't go down the road, and one person goes down the road, and then some. So that's what I always just try to tell families when they're trying to make sense of it. I try to let them know that, listen, don't try to make sense of it, right? Yes, you did a great job raising them, right? Yes, you gave them as much love as you could. Yes, they had everything that they needed to be as successful in life and to be a successful young adult. Why are they trying to kill themselves with drugs and alcohol? Your guess is as good as mine, right? So there's no formula. There's no, but I know one thing. So I think which is worth sharing, so when I, earlier talked about, when I disappeared for 10 years, let me tell you how I got off the street.
That's what I was going to ask. So go ahead.
This is the part that, I think it's worth, like, and what happened to my daughter kind of carries into what I'm doing in the way that, and Justin and Gary are very like-minded. Like, we're all like-minded in this way. We have very big hearts. And so I try to carry this same philosophy into our business today. Right. And so 10 years, right. I don't even know, to be honest with you, how I ended up off of the street, right? I just finally got to the point where I think I just was sick and tired of being sick and tired, right?
Yeah.
I obviously wasn't going to die, right? But the right day, the right time, I was incarcerated. My sister found me. Before you knew it, I was on a Greyhound bus back to Sarasota, where my sister lived previously, and why Sarasota? Could have been any city, right? She lived here previously. It seemed like a cool town to start over in. And so shortly after, my sister, I got out of jail. There was a Greyhound bus ticket waiting for me. I got on a Greyhound bus, come here, and, immediately get into a halfway house. Other than my sister, I've had no contact with anybody in my family. My daughter, who is now 21, 20-ish, right? When I resurface, like, no communication with anybody, no cards, no phone calls, no nothing. And so, like, a couple months after, like, I'm in this halfway house, talking to my sister on a, daily, weekly basis, because she wants to know everything. What have I been doing for 10 years? Where did I live? What happened to me? And so then she calls me one day and she was like, hey, she says, somebody wants to talk to you. I really wasn't thinking anything of it other than, who could want to talk to me? Who even knows I'm alive? Who knows I'm here? But she says, Blaise wants to talk to you. Blaise is the name of my daughter. And so I remember in that moment thinking to myself, standing in the front yard of this halfway house, okay, dude, like, this is where the rubber meets the road. Like, I've been running from this 10-year-old kid for a decade.
Which one?
Yeah,
both.
True.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I, a lot of feelings ran through my mind in that moment, right? Did I want to just tell my sister, listen, I can't do this right now. I'm sorry. I just tell her whatever you want to tell her, but I can't have this conversation with this grown woman who, the last time I saw her, she was 10 years old, riding a 4-wheeler that I bought her in the front yard. But for whatever reason, man, I mustered up just enough courage to say to my sister, okay, tell her to call me. Right. And I think, what probably, again, like I said earlier, the phone calls or the waiting on the front step, waiting for my mom, could have been 10 minutes, could have been an hour. I don't know. But my phone rings, at this time. Listen, Clark, I like to talk about it because I'm like, I don't have like a pot to piss in. I got nothing, right?
Yeah.
I've got a little Metro flip phone, you know, and the phone rings and I answer the phone. It's my daughter, right? And like I just burst into tears,
Yeah.
you know, because what do I say? What am I supposed to say? You know, the only thing that I could say, I think the only rational thing to say is I just kept saying, I'm sorry, as I'm blubbering like a 10-year-old kid
Yeah.
that didn't get the candy that they asked for, right? I'm talking about like real crying. Like I can't talk, I can't speak. You know, I'm trying to catch my breath, you know, because all these emotions are coming back over 10 years of me being gone and having literally no contact. All of that is coming back in this moment on the phone with my daughter. And so, and I just keep saying, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry. It's the only thing I can say. You know, so at some point, you know, I was able to compose myself enough, you know, to stop crying, you know, kind of get my bearings about, get my wits about me type of thing. And, you know, I just took one deep breath, you know, with a clear voice this time, you know, and I just said, Blaze, I said, I'm sorry. And she said, it's okay, Dad. We all make mistakes. And like in that moment, like, I don't know, I've never really experienced it before. I felt like a 5-ton boulder had been lifted off of my shoulders and thrown onto the ground.
I I mean, I'm not telling you anything you don't know, but your daughter at that age, I mean, that's a special person. That's a special
Yeah,
person.
she's something else, man. Because listen, you know, she could have easily arranged that phone call
Yeah.
to say, F you, don't ever call me again. Don't you ever try to contact me again. And it would have been justified and I would have had to honor that.
Yeah.
Right. But that's not what she said.
And it seems like it just that's all it like that's it, that's all it took. But you mentioned the weight being lifted and I mean you were off and running almost. Did everything happen pretty quick after that in terms of getting up
Yeah.
on your feet?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, after that, I mean, this happened. So I got off the streets in November, 2012. Matter of fact, November, December, like the next month for Christmas, I was back in Brooksville to have Christmas at my sister's house, right? And my daughter was there
Wow.
a month later.
What was that like?
Dude, it was wild.
Yeah.
Because here's the thing, man. You know, what as much as I want to say that it was like it was really, 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 really awkward, but it just wasn't.
Yeah.
You know, because from the first phone call that I had with my daughter that I just described to Christmas Day, we must have talked 50 times. Right. So by the time we saw each other just a month later at my sister's house, right, it was just, you know, hugs and what's going on, you know, and where you know, it's just I don't know. It was fucking cool, man. It was really cool, Clark.
Yeah.
You know, we just, and ever since then, we, and here's the one thing that and I think a couple reasons that I think my, relationship with my daughter was successful, right? One thing that I did not do, now that I was off the streets and putting my life back together, I did not try to impose on her,
Yeah.
right? And be that father figure that, you know, and I didn't try to make up for lost time, you know, and start telling her what to do. Cause you know, when we're 20 years old, like we're doing some crazy shit out there, you know, and she was doing it, right? But I didn't try to be that father figure and tell her the difference between right and wrong had I never left. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I was there often, We saw each other often. We talked all the time. Um, and we just continue to just build on the relationship, and now, oh my God, how many years is it now? 10 years later, right? 11 years later. Um, Dude, we have a fantastic relationship,
Yeah.
right? I've got two beautiful grandkids. She's doing really well, you know. I think one of the pivotal things that happened is, that when COVID hit, she was in the same position that many people were in, out of work, right? No money, no job, nowhere to turn to, right? And I was able to be there for her financially because of recruiting, right? And so I helped put her pay bills, and buy the kids clothes and buy food. And then she decided that she wanted to go to welding, and she's a country girl, good old fashioned country girl, man, drives the truck and everything.
It's tough.
She did. Yeah, dude, she loves it, man. Listen, she is like a real country girl, lives in a country town. She called me up. She's like, Dad, I want to go to welding school. I was like, perfect. Let's do it, And so we did. Put her through welding school. She aced it. She got a great job at Ringhaver welding, and she's a mechanic on bulldozers. And so the thing for me is like here's where our relationship is today, right? I am still a non-intrusive father to her, right? We talk often. Like, I go up there and see her. She lives about 70 miles north of here. Go up there and see her and my grandkids as often as I can. But at the end of the day, right, she knows without a shadow of the doubt that I am here. And if she ever needs me, I am only a phone call away. And I will drop everything. And I've had to do it a couple times. I will drop anything that I'm doing and I will go there. And I think that is a peace of mind that I can give her today, because she chose to forgive me in a moment that she didn't have to.
I mean, it's such a gift to be able to give back to her, and I think just the power of love. I mean, I think I remember reading like the Harry Potter books growing up and all that, kind of thinking it was cheesy, like love's the number. It is. It's so right. I mean, of all the things, you lead with that. You lead with the love and acting in love, right? And what's the one of the biggest acts of love is forgiveness and grace.
Yeah.
And just I get chills hearing your story, and just the strength of your daughter at 21 to say that to you. I mean, did she ever tell you like where that got that from? Did she tell you she meant it when she said it, or did she just think like she couldn't say it? Like, I mean,
Yeah,
how did that like?
like
You know,
we
yeah,
talked about that, shortly thereafter, at some point. And she just said she just thought I don't know where she gets it. My daughter is a very rough and rugged, like I said, country girl, but has a very tender heart. Where she got that from, I don't know. Because it wasn't really from me. I've had to learn to how to have a tender heart. She just said she thought it was the right thing to do.
I love that. I I share. We don't have to go dive deeper, but into that. But in my journey, that feeling of peace, that forgiveness of myself, of my parents, all my parents that I've had, family members. There's nothing more powerful. I know this is a recruiting podcast. We talk about sales, but I mean, heck, in your day to day, in a sales industry, you have to get over stuff, right? Give yourself grace, give prospects and clients and candidates grace, and that's why I love this industry and being in it and talk to people like yourself, because the same the principles of life hold true. They're really hard to put into play and to do every day, and especially when the stakes are as high as what you two had to go through and try to mend and see if you could even mend. But man, the fruits of what's possible when you have like the courage to forgive. And again, she let you win appropriately, right? And you did the same thing. It doesn't have to be all everything's good now. It took years, right? And
Yeah.
it didn't take
Yes.
years, but just to do that, and they say well, forgiveness is for yourself. I mean, she did that probably for herself. right? I
Yes,
would
she
have,
did.
right? I would have to imagine. I know that that's what I've had to do, and it's so powerful. And I say it because whoever listens, I know things can be tough for a lot of people right now. And this recruiting, this industry can be tough right now and hard. But man, you'll never regret doing that and leading with that. And things turn. As you said, the light. You mentioned that light. I'm sure the light was beaming, was blinding you when that happened. And like you can control that in a sense. Like that's what's powerful. It's just kind of knowing you have the control to make some of those choices to forgive and lead with love and all that, and kind of let go of resentment. It's super powerful. So I appreciate you sharing and your daughter's impact and her role in all that, because it's just an amazing reminder of really all these crazy things that can happen, like how simple, quote unquote, it can be to like to move on, like to move forward. Excuse me. Yeah,
Yeah, listen, it's forgiveness is a big thing, man.
yeah.
You
So
know, being holding on to grudges, and I'm not saying that some grudges aren't worthy and justified, but for the most part, man, when you can forgive somebody that's harmed you, right? It allows you to live freer.
yeah, it absolutely does. Well, I know I've taken up way too much of your time, and I know you got to go.
No problem, man.
But we're gonna wrap this up. I mean, Pete, it's been awesome. Obviously, talking to you both on the recruiting side. I think we'll probably have to split this up or something, because there's business and not business covered in this episode.
Yeah,
But it's your story has such an impact, and I think just what you've done, overcome what your daughter's done. I mean, it's such a testament to family and love, and just play the long game and the battle, and just chip away and speak up and figure out a way to process what you've gone through, and it's never really too late. Um,
never. If
so
you're breathing, it's never too late.
I love that, man. Any last thing that you want to share or add?
Nothing, man. Listen, I just want to say thank you, Clark, for having me on. We've went into some areas that were unexpected for both of us,
Yeah.
but I believe provided a lot of value for both of us and hopefully for your listeners.
Absolutely. Oh, it definitely did. So I feel the same. I appreciate it. Thank you. I know this won't be the last time that we talk, and I'm excited that we just now know each other and have kind of built that foundation. So I appreciate you, man.
I appreciate you, Clark. Thank you,
All right.
man.
All right. Well, that's it. And until next time, we'll see you guys.